Seasonal forecasting is one of the toughest things meteorologists do, given the time span and the growing uncertainty. And this is despite having many tools at our disposal.
But as is tradition, we will give it the old college try, stick to the science, and let you know what we think about the upcoming winter season.
We'll start things off tonight with Ben Reppert. We'll bring him in for some climatology and fun with numbers. Ben?
Thanks very much, Rob. Yes, every seasonal outlook can benefit from first taking a look at climatology and persistence. It can often be a good forecasting technique. We'll start with temperature, looking at the last 10 winters in Pennsylvania by month and then season overall. Last winter, almost an anomaly. All 3 months and therefore the season as a whole below average in temperature. And that was our first colder than average winter in 7 years. And if you notice all these orange blocks, they outnumber the blue ones, particularly looking at the season as a whole. So that would argue that this coming winter, persistence would argue for a warmer than average season coming up. How about snowfall? Well, first, let's remind you what those long-term normals are. About 2 feet is normal in Philadelphia, 2.5 to 3 feet for Allentown, Harrisburg, and Williamsport. Low to mid 40s for Scranton State College and Pittsburgh, and then much more than that, of course, Laurel, Summit, Erie, and Bradford. If we just consider the last 10 winters, though, we have been in a bit of a snow drought. Many locations southeast of the mountains, anywhere from just 15 to 30 inches of snow, and even the locations that average a lot more have seen considerably less than that if you average the past 10 seasons together. So from the persistence standpoint, that would argue for below average snow once again. In fact, many locations in Pennsylvania are seeing streaks of below normal snow seasons in a row on the order of 3 to 4 years, with the exceptions of the lake belts and the Laurel Highlands. Now, despite that, while we think that we could be headed for a below normal snow winter, we did have a long shot outstanding based on motion in the atmosphere that suggested that December could actually be a snowier than average month. And based on some of those analogs, we actually foresaw the possibility that December could have a snow surplus on the order of, say, 20 to 40%. One way to increase the odds of a snowy December, of course, would be to have a cold December. And we are starting to see some signals, Rob, that that could be in the cards this year.
Thanks, Ben. Very interesting. We're talking about the potential for a snowy December. What do some of the analogs say? Let's turn things over to Jon Nese for some analog insight.
Thanks, Rob. And if there's an analog that must be checked for every winter outlook, it's whether there's an El Nino or a La Nina occurring. And the answer this year is these blue colors in the central and eastern tropical Pacific Ocean, cooler than average water there. That's a La Nina. And that can have impacts in terms of the way the jet stream behaves across the lower 48 states. Computer models, whether they be statistical models or the models that actually solve the equations, are keeping the forecast in a La Nina at least for the first half of winter. So we're going to go with the idea that there will be a La Nina occurring during the month of December. And in past Decembers, when a La Nina was in progress, the tendency across the northern U.S., these blue colors, is for a cooler than average December. One other analog we're looking at, the high altitude winds in the vicinity of the North Pole. They typically circle the North Pole, and there's a sign that they may be weakening, something we call a sudden stratospheric warming. And that kind of a pattern in November is quite unusual. There have only been a couple Novembers with this sudden stratospheric warming event. And what happened in the December after those Novembers? Once again, a cooler than average signal in Pennsylvania. So there's a second analog that suggests December will be cooler than average. In fact, the computer modeling, the long-range computer modeling out 10 to 15 days is showing a large blob of anomalously cold air starting to leak into the lower 48 states during the first 5 days of December. So everything there points to a colder than average December. As for now, we're going to jump to February, the other half, or the latter third of winter. We presented this long shot to you last Thursday based on something called a very negative Indian Ocean dipole, suggested that February would be warmer than average in Pennsylvania. We're going to stick with that. In fact, during the winters with that negative Indian Ocean dipole pattern, this was the anomaly map for February. These reds indicate temperatures well above average. So we're going to go with a cooler than average December, warmer than average February. Rob?
And thanks for that, John. Of course, Weather World watchers know that we use the ensemble forecasting technique when it comes to week 2 trends, climate watch, and other segments. Why not apply that same mentality to tonight's winter outlook? We'll start, though, by looking at the ECMWF UK Met Super Blend. So 50 different model members as part of this, averaged out over the course of December, January, and February. So meteorological winter. We've also looked at the individual months and kind of shows that for the season overall, leans on the warm side for Pennsylvania. So maybe that warmth in February offsets the early chill that we see in December. Another model product, the North American Multi-Model Ensemble, has 71 different members, equally weighted, and as over the course of December, January, and February also leans above average for Pennsylvania on the order of a couple of degrees. For precipitation, this map is almost what you'd expect to see in a La Niña winter, with a wet lean across parts of the Midwest and into western Pennsylvania, maybe a more active lake effect start to the season, but dry anomalies showing up in the Mid-Atlantic, so limited coastal storm potential, much as you'd expect to see in a La Niña winter. The NMME precipitation anomaly map, very similar to what we just saw on that super blend. That, along with the analogs and climatology, inform our winter outlook. We're going to call for a front-loaded winter this season, the best chance for a wintry month, probably in December. For temperature, above average statewide. It does lean cold in December, then leans warm in February. Some ups and downs in between in January. We think that warmth in February, though, will really offset the early chill. For precipitation, near average statewide. It does lean wetter in the west and drier in the east with limited coastal storm potential. And for snowfall, below average once again statewide, but there's a glimmer of hope for snow lovers out there. December is our best chance to have a snowier than average month, and it is favorable for lake effect early in the season. And there it is, our official Weather World winter weather outlook.
No subliminal messages from my tie.
Let the flakes fly. And thank you so much, Ben, for joining us tonight.
You bet.
We'll be back in just a moment with more.